Path of Exile is it's a lot more than I expected. Look, over the years, I've tried to avoid playing Path of Exile, not because it was a game that I didn't think that I would like, but because of the reputation the game has built for itself over time. Being this game of immeasurable complexity and depth to the point where it is intimidating for a new player to want to try to get involved in. But at the exact same time, it's also built a reputation of being an incredibly well-ran live service game, and one that is tirelessly supported by both its community and its developers. So I felt it was time for me to finally give this game its fair shake. That's what I want to talk about today. Look, I've played Path of Exile in the past. I've dipped my toes in, got my feet wet, but ultimately I drowned before I ever got to the beach. I've never finished the campaign. That is, until today. I'm now in the early throes of the end game for Path of Exile, and I want to talk about those past failures. I want to talk about my last 30 plus hours of gameplay, what it looked like, what it felt like, and most importantly, because of the fact of it being a live service game and a free-to-play game, what it cost. So I recently played Warframe for the very first time, and I documented my entire experience here on YouTube, and I had so much fun doing it that I'm doing it again here with Path of Exile. Now, this wasn't my first choice following Warframe, but the recent update, Settlers of Kalgur, caught my attention. An idle mechanic where you can trade currency, respec most importantly, and passively earn gear even when you're not even playing, seemed like the perfect time for an inexperienced or new player to be able to hop in because it adds a level of forgiveness and convenience that was otherwise not in the game. So I downloaded the game, fired it up, and logged in. I want to start off by saying that PoE has the greatest character selector I have ever seen. No unnecessary information, just the name of the class and a character background that's voiced by one of the most badass voice actors I've ever heard.
Learn well the lessons the Drake class will teach you, witch. It is your only hope of finding your way home.
The sharpness of his words set the tone right away. You're no hero, you're a criminal, exiled to a hellscape for your crimes. There's something in that, something far more interesting and visceral than the typical hero story that we've been fed and served year over year. I've been exhausted by the softness of modern games' approach to their different narratives, so afraid to offend and disgust, and I found myself exhilarated by how unafraid this game is to be itself, and honestly never stops being. After naming my witch, I quickly load onto a beach where I'm greeted by a wounded exile leaned up against a log. He tells me that we are the only survivors to make it ashore. He explains to me that the island is crawling with criminals, has me arm myself with a wand before he's devoured by an undead. I kill it and I get my first skill gem, and within seconds the game reveals its complexity. PoE doesn't use the standard trope of leveling up to unlock more skills. No, skills are contained in gems, and gems have varying qualities, and you can level them up, and you can see every detail of the spell or skill by hovering over them. When playing for the first time, I'll be honest, this was immediately jarring. All games copy off of one another, at least to some extent, and systems are the most common shared aspect for any loot-driven ARPG. After playing enough of any type of game, you're going to build up a certain level of familiarity, and when you have that pre-existing knowledge and experience, it makes the transition into these games a lot more comfortable. However, Path of Exile subverts that comfort. Skills and spells are no longer things that you unlock, they're things that you find and buy. Passives for those spells are the exact same thing. You have to find and buy those as well, and those are socketed into linked sockets on your gear, and that's how you modify specific spells. And not all passive gems are compatible with all skills, and not all skills react the same way to different passives. I shrug it off, absorb what I can, and continue to play. PoE is highly responsive. Your character goes exactly where you want them to. It plays how you would expect a game like this would play. Environments are highly detailed, the background music is haunting, character animations are solid, and enemies from the very start, surprisingly, hit like a truck. I fireball some enemies down, I pick up some random pieces of loot, and then I level up and I'm given a passive point, which I quickly realize is a drop in the ocean against the backdrop of a massive passive tree. This is where I've quit. This is where I've failed before, and I know that I'm not alone. Path of Exile's skill tree is the equivalent to a novel response that you get from a text message that you sent to a friend simply asking, "What's up?" It's the sometimes 1,400 word essays that I see in the comment sections of my video because somebody disagrees with me. It's the essayists on Twitch in chat. It's too much, too fast, and so overwhelming that you don't even want to look at it. This tree is what's prevented me from playing the game or continuing to play the game in the past. I try to play games as blind as I can. I stay away from guides, metas, and more because I don't want anything spoiling my journey, and I learn best when I'm taking my time to understand the game rather than just playing the game on autopilot. I've effectively bricked characters in the past because the game doesn't really allow you to freely reset your skill tree, and you can only remove points with a free single point book that you get, or a few of those that you get throughout the campaign, or using a currency called Orbs of Regret. As a new player playing without guidance, depending on how far off the rails your build gets, you can easily find yourself in a place where there's no way to respec outside of going out and farming currency to respec yourself or starting a new character. And even if you do respec to the way that you want, you could easily render your character unplayable because skills and gems and gear all have base stat requirements, and if you no longer meet those, well, you no longer can play your character. Look, I'm gonna level with you. That's just not fun. Making a mistake and needing to farm a currency to be able to fix it just doesn't feel good. Accidentally removing a passive stat that allows you to be able to use certain spells or gear that you were using hurts even worse, and for me, it's resulted in outright quitting the game time and time again. It took time for me to come to the realization that I wouldn't have made those mistakes if I planned ahead, but to plan ahead, you have to know the game. Meaning Path of Exile isn't for new casual players, it's for people who are thoroughly researching before they make any choices, planning ahead before they're even playing the game, and find gratification in doing that. And if you're not one of those players, you have to learn to become one of them by following the lead of those players that have already put out build guides, planners, and item filters leading the way. You know, it's weird. This is usually when I would talk about how I think that this is bad game design because it's convoluted and confusing and all the systems are often intertwined, so any issue you have or mistake you make ends up being multiplicative because it ends up affecting other areas of the game as well. And while I don't like that and it sucks, at the exact same time, I have to respect it because there's not a lot of games that are out there that are like this. Most games, you have to put 50, 60, 100 hours into them before you can get any level of complexity or challenge out of them, but Path of Exile just hits you with it straight from the start. And the game is made for a very specific audience, and they make that very clear. And even if you're not one of those players, they're facilitating the ability for you to become one of the PoE players after a while, because you're going to learn that and pick that up the longer that you play the game. And there's something really cool about that. But so many AAA games and live service games that I've seen over the year try to widen their scope to the point where they can try to bring in as many people as they possibly can, trying to make their games as accessible and inclusive as possible, watering down the final product to the point it's not even recognizable, playable, or enjoyable for that matter. You have grinding gear games in Path of Exile that has narrowed their scope. They know who their audience is. They know what kind of game they're trying to make, and it works for them. And the game has a very specific and unique identity, and it works. And I see that the more that I play the game, it becomes more and more apparent that I play. Even though I can sit here and think to myself, man, I wish things are a little bit different. I wish things were explained better, displayed better, that systems were a little bit more forgiving in the game. At the exact same time, I just have to respect the game for being what it is. So I did things differently this time. I actually followed a build guide to the letter. I filled in the gaps anytime there was something that I couldn't achieve that it wanted, and I continued to make my way through the game. In this, I ended up realizing that my past failures yielded some underlying experience that made playing the game this time through that much easier. I understood map layouts, knew of quest rewards, understood currencies, and even knew that I could craft items by selling specific things to vendors, like selling a gem and an iron ring to make a resistance ring, or selling tricolored items to yield a chromatic orb so I could recolor sockets in another piece of gear. This past knowledge allowed me to start taking my time to better understand the skill tree, know why I'm heading in a certain direction and what benefits it gives, realizing that the passive tree is there to support the ability of the chosen gems that you're using, not the other way around. Your build is mostly using red and blue gems. Well, you want intellect and strength nodes based on those stats because that's what you need to be able to level those gems and continue to use them, as well as get gear that uses those gem sockets and those colors. Then I realized that if you're playing melee, magic, minions, or ranged, you want to pick up those nodes along the way as you're picking up those different stat lines. In this, I realized that my past failures were never a waste of time. They were just the outcome of me learning the game for the first time. And that's part of the journey. Every single game that I've played for years now doesn't allow the player to outright fail, and I think that both players and developers have forgotten how much value there is in learning a game and learning from your past failures, and how oftentimes it makes conquering challenges that much more rewarding. There's something very distinct and real about a game that is not afraid to let you fail, even let you quit, and because of that, it makes you want to overcome these challenges even more. As I continued to play the game, I found that my past knowledge, as well as the build guide that I was using, was allowing me to start to drink in the finer elements of the game that I often overlooked when I played it in the past. Most notably the story, characters, voice acting, and music, all of which exceed my expectations and, at times, the standards of what we have for full-priced games. Similarly to my experience with Warframe, Path of Exile isn't a great free-to-play game, it's just a great game that happens to be free-to-play. While gameplay always comes first, many modern games cut costs on quality through things that elevate the player's experience, like quality writing, music, voice acting, art design, and atmosphere. While none of these things make a great game on their own, if the gameplay is great, and you have all these added elements of quality, it makes a good game legendary. All NPCs are fully voice acted, no reading necessary, and the vast majority of them are incredibly well voice acted with unique personalities and backgrounds. Tile set after tile set, you are exposed to a wild variety of detailed environments with unique enemies and layouts. Each zone has its own background music, with some of them so good they become the background music to the script that I'm writing right now at this very second, and some of them even use their own version of environmental storytelling in a way that I've never even seen before. There's this section of the game where you're chasing down Piety, and you enter into the facility that they use for experiments, and there's these rivers of blood, bodies floating around, tension building music playing in the background while you hear the pained screams of her victims off in the distance. Path of Exile is just so damn brutal and dark. A legacy that was picked up by the developers, a torch that they are carrying for Diablo 2, but they've cranked it up to 11. The lore in this game is so primal and savage. Almost anytime you go to save somebody, they die, and your character just shrugs it off because death is so cheap in this world. The first boss that you go to fight is in a prison. He's a prison warden, and he was imbued with these thaumaturgical gems, part of this experiment. He was wishing for greater power. And after he survived the experiment, he awoke to kill everybody that granted him those powers, and he was locked in the prison because everybody was so terrified of him that they left. His hands and arms are now big lumps of flesh because he beat on the walls of the prison for over 250 years. It's so metal. In comparison to later lore and bosses, this is vanilla. This is slice of life anime. This is Fruits Basket. The game only continues to ramp from here, and it's just trying to match the unbridled might of your character. From beasts to monsters to warriors to gods to eldritch horrors that defy reasoning, it's as if your character is an affront to the laws of reality itself, and as such, the only way to challenge you is to break reality itself. I was a Diablo kid. Diablo 2. I remember I had a friend of mine that came over to the house. He had a cracked version of Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction. Installed it on our family PC, and that was all she wrote. I was glued. You couldn't get me off of that computer. I lived on that damn thing because I enjoyed the game so much. Back in the day, for me, being able to play mature games or having mature games were a rarity. I played Pokemon and JRPGs. That was literally the only things that I played. And I remember how shocked I was and enthralled when I watched that opening cutscene for Diablo 2, reading the stories and listening to the stories in Diablo 2. It was so good. And there are very few games that are out there that can nail that feeling of unease and curiosity when it comes to matters of human depravity, demons, magic, thaumaturgical weapons, and technology mixed together. The premise of all of these different things mixed with gods and immortality and everything else, it's just so damn good. It's just so incredible. You can't help but want to listen to some of the people because some of the things that they say is wild. It's wild. And I think one of the things that I really respect and I really enjoy about this game is the fact that character power feels like it's always being challenged by the story equally. In a lot of cases, looking back at playing Diablo, well, if you killed a demon, well, a lesser evil or a greater evil, well, they're basically all the same to you. And it's like, well, why is this one more strong? Oh, he ate one of the other demons or something like that. It's like, that's not good enough, man. In this game, they're like, yeah, no, we're going to kick it up a notch. Literally every single time you go to fight something else, the next thing that you're fighting, the next bigger enemy that you fight just gets even crazier. And I like that. It feels oddly more natural, even though it's technically unnatural. But yeah. And it's not just the narrative of the game that continues to swell and grow and match you. It's the content that this game serves, the massive amount of content in this game. Path of Exile officially released back in October of 2013, and it quickly became a prominent figure in the action RPG genre for over a decade now, and it just keeps going, keeps growing. The longevity and the continued success of the game can be attributed to the innovative approach that they've taken when it comes to content updates through their league system. Leagues are temporary events that introduce new mechanics, challenges, and rewards. They're designed to keep the gameplay fresh and engaging, keep bringing players back. These leagues typically last around 3 months or more, and after which these mechanics are then integrated into the game permanently, or they're removed based on player feedback and overall impact on the game's balance. Many of the league mechanics have become staple features in Path of Exile, offering diverse ways to be able to progress through the game, the campaign, endgame, whatever it might be. For instance, I ended up doing some of the Immortal Syndicate, a complex web of encounters where I can manipulate people to gain more valuable rewards. There's the Delve League, where there's an infinite dungeon, an azurite mine. I gather materials in the open world, and then I get to explore deeper levels of the mine for more unique rewards and challenges. Similarly, there's also the Temple of Axolotl, I think is how you pronounce that. I'm not really too sure, where you can change the layout of the dungeon and you go through these different time traveling mechanics. I don't understand it. I don't get it. There's actually a lot of these that I don't understand at all. There's this one like fractal mirror portal looking thing that I find on maps. I don't know what it is. I'll have to look into it. Or I don't. The best part about these league mechanics is that they're all optional. Do them if you want to, or pass them right by. Focus on learning specific league mechanics that you are actually interested in and just ignore the rest. My biggest issue when first playing is that I didn't have that kind of context, and it took me forever to be able to progress through some of these areas in the campaign because I was trying to learn all of these different league mechanics at once, and I couldn't get a grip on them or how to optimize them. Now that I have some level of experience, I use the bestiary to grab some specific currencies that I need or fill a specific gear slot. I tap on the frozen enemies to be able to collect essences and craft items when I find a solid base. And in the current league, I take a little bit more time to go out and try to optimize my town and passively earn things that will help me down the road. Each one of these mechanics serves as their own way to be able to break any sense of monotony or boredom that I felt when I was playing it. I was surprised with how seamlessly some of these mechanics felt like they were introduced into general progression. Oftentimes, I felt like I could just tap them and go, and some of the other mechanics are a little bit more disruptive. They'll actually stop your movement. You got to go into a portal and stuff, so those ones I usually skip, but I especially like the current mechanic. I can just pick up gold whenever I want to, or the bestiary where I can capture targets that are already on the field when I'm searching for something else. And I also really like delves where I can just tap on the chest, store the energy that I need, and use the mechanic whenever I want to. When I look at a game like Diablo 4, they often have league mechanics that are the primary means in which you are progressing that season. And while I think it makes sense from a content perspective, I don't think it makes sense from a player perspective, because oftentimes we may not even be interested in that mechanic. Heck, we might not even like it and only really want to use parts of it so that we can progress further in other areas. Path of Exile is very much one of those play your own way kind of games. Classes, in essence, are just a blank canvas that you can use whatever skills or spells that you want to on them. You can truly make distinct and unique builds all on your own. You can skip content, interact with mechanics that you want to, and that spirit is found everywhere in the game. As I mentioned previously, this is my first time ever getting this far through the campaign, clearing the campaign. I just unlocked the Atlas of Worlds, a fully customizable endgame where I can choose my path, my modifiers, what events I see, what bosses I see, what loot I see, and more. I can combine this with any of the other League mechanics that I enjoy and develop an end game that I want to play rather than what somebody else thinks I should be playing. You know, it's genuinely wild how customizable your experience is when you're playing Path of Exile. And I think it takes some time and experience to be able to come to the realization, at least it did for me, to understand that you don't need to do everything in Path of Exile. You just need to focus on a couple of things. And it's best to find things that you enjoy the most because you're going to be doing them a lot. And if you think about it, if I'm trying to do everything all at once, I'm probably not going to get very far. But if I focus very hardcore on just a couple of things, you're going to be able to progress those enough to get the rewards that you need to be useful in the end game. And I think that's awesome because there's two things that I've always wanted in more games, and I've talked about it in other videos in the past, which is that I want more games that are not afraid to be themselves, but I also want games to not stand in the way of how players want to play those games, the experience that the players actually want to have. And when you put those things next to each other, it sounds almost impossible to do, but Path of Exile seemingly pulls it off without any effort at all. It's impressive. Genuinely is. Look, over the last few years, I've been so exhausted by live service games, I completely stopped playing them for the most part, because anytime I would take any type of short or extended break, I'd come back to a game that just didn't feel comfortable to play anymore because I had to relearn so many different things, or they're having me do something that I'm not even interested in doing, or whatever it might be. And as such, I end up just throwing the games to the side because I just don't want to play it anymore. I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to have to deal with coming back to something that I don't know how to play, even though it was only, 6 months or a year since I played it last. And Path of Exile goes right around that. By allowing you to be able to take on any of these mechanics and some of this content at whatever pace that you want, it gives you the room and the space to be able to learn the things that you want to learn, to play the things that you want to play. And especially if we're looking at the most recent League mechanic, the Settlers of Kalgur, I think is what it's called, that's passive. I'm picking up gold as I'm playing the game. I can go to the city and upgrade it or do whatever I want any time that I want. And even if I forget about it for too long, well, I still have heaps of gold that I'm going to be able to go and reinvest into that town and use. And I think that's awesome, especially just the passive mechanic of earning gear and stuff like that as well. And it's great for a new player experience because it makes it where those systems are a little bit less intimidating. And I really hope that something similar makes its way over to Path of Exile 2, because it's going to make the new player experience just that much more approachable and more comfortable for players when they're first starting out. It's crazy to think about how much content is in Path of Exile, but it's even more crazy when you start to realize that it's free. Well, kind of. One of my biggest issues when it comes to most live service games is how lazy they are when it comes to monetization. Rather than trying to provide anything of value to us, rather than working for our money, they oftentimes will try to squeeze more money out of the players by taking it from areas that already exist in the game. Just recently, EA had to walk back proposed changes on price hikes for a battle pass in Apex Legends, gaslighting the players, saying that it was all to provide them more value in the future, when in fact it did the opposite. If you want to monetize your game, be creative, earn my money, and I'll be happy to give it to you. Path of Exile is working for my money. PoE is by far one of the most customizable games that I've played outside of Warframe. You have gear skins, weapon skins, auras, pets, cloaks, trailing effects behind your character, and you can even change the way that spells and abilities look in the game. Just about everything that is character related can be customized in some way, and better yet, they're transparent about it. I think what I love most about the cosmetic shop in Path of Exile is the fact that every single transaction that's in there comes with its own individual YouTube video that shows you what those weapon effects and skins look like in actual gameplay, rather than just going off of an image. Player expression is key to any successful live service game. Yes, you need the game to be fun and filled with content, but you need some way to be able to monetize it, and customization is the best way to be able to do that. Now, I will say that I do think that it comes at a great cost in Path of Exile. While skins and effects are really cool, the vanilla weapons and clothing seem to take a noticeable hit. I think one of the core issues with a game that heavily leans into cosmetics is that the developers are incentivized to make the rest of the game look weaker in comparison. I'm not a huge fan of this, especially in an action RPG. Part of the fun of being a badass is looking like one, and while some weapons and gear skins and sets can look pretty cool, they pale in comparison to what you can buy. Which brings me to the topic of stash tabs, the most contentious of microtransactions in Path of Exile, and it's one that I am generally conflicted on. I can buy storage space, cool, which when you're progressing through the campaign, it's not necessary whatsoever, but it definitely becomes a wall if you wish to progress in the end game or if you plan to trade. And trading in a game like this is what keeps it alive and interesting. It keeps that community thriving. While I might not be able to find what I need when I'm playing the game, I could pull together other resources and trade with another player to get an item or a few items that help me get unstuck or unhalted from progress because of my bad RNG. While solo self-found is 100% viable, most players that are going into the endgame are going to want to trade. However, you can't list items to the public unless you own a premium stash tab. Furthermore, the longer that you play, the more league mechanics that you get involved in, the more likely you are to run out of space relatively quickly, and as such, buying a stash tab or buying a space in your storage is less of an option and more of a requirement to play. Personally, I think that stash space should be expanded a little bit, at least give a single premium stash tab to new players so they have some room to grow and the ability to list and put items up for trade without having to use a third-party website. But overall, I don't really have an issue with stash tabs as a concept. It's just the generic premium ones, especially once you start contrasting them with item-specific tabs like Essence, Map, Currency, or some of the other League ones, because they're unique, they're highly functional, they are incredibly user-friendly and provide a lot of value for the money that's actually spent on them. I don't think I get the same value from a standard premium stash tab as I do the other ones, and that purchase just feels generic and forced. While there is room to criticize, I do appreciate that all stash tabs are bound to your account. You don't need to buy them again for every other character, and also Grinding Gear Games has said that, well, any of your purchases from Path of Exile 1 are going to get carried over to Path of Exile 2. I appreciate that. Now, I've heard from Path of Exile fans directly that they reference the stash tabs as the box price for the game, and to be honest with you, I'm just going to have to agree with that one. Look, there's hundreds, if not thousands, there is thousands and thousands of hours of gameplay for players, tons of content, for absolutely nothing. And as much as I would love to live in a world in which free-to-play was free-to-play with no caveats, I recognize that we don't live in a utopia, and there has to be some type of equivalent exchange for us to get a game like this and a service like this. And you're going to have to put some things out of the reach of players for them to be able to motivate you to spend money. I get it. It's a business. And look, to be honest with you, throwing them $20 to $30 to be able to play a game that has this much content that's been supported this much for this long is beyond worth it. It's the easiest purchase I've ever made. Even more so, just before recording this video, I ended up buying one of their supporter packs because I've enjoyed the game that much. And they don't obfuscate currency. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. I don't know what to say. What is it, like $5 for 50 coins or something like that is, I think, what it comes out to be. 200 coins is $20. 100 coins is $10. The money actually makes sense on the screen. They're not trying to rip me off by having me over-invested with money that I can't actually spend in the game. I love it. I love it. It's great. It's exactly what I want to see. They have better monetization in Path of Exile than most AAA games have in their microtransaction shops. It's insane. The society we live in. Look, when we talk about microtransactions and just overall monetization, it's always about the value received and the value delivered. How much am I giving you and what am I getting back? And at the end of the day, Path of Exile is a game that just keeps on giving. Over the years, I've grown to hate live service games and stay away from free-to-play games entirely because I feel like they represent an industry-wide move to commoditize and commercialize games to a point where we're going to be far exceeding what we'd normally spend on a game, especially when we're looking at the box price for a game. They want to chop these games up into pieces, sell it to us bit by bit, hike the price as inflation grows, and all the while return less and less value to the players. I mean, that's the name of the game. Do as little as you possibly can for as much money as possible, and let's see how far we can push it until the players push back, and then, well, we'll just try again later. I'm growing to realize that not every studio and publisher is the enemy. Some of them that are out there do seek to provide players with games that they actually want to play, charge them a fair price, and then continue to deliver on that. Path of Exile is one of those games. Grinding Gear Games is one of those developers. While they were inspired by Diablo and Blizzard, they couldn't be any more different. They made a dark and depraved game with no shortcuts, no self-censoring or drops in quality. While it's a hard game to get into and it's not designed for new players, it's a journey that grows on you as you continue to play it. Learn, fail, and then overcome. It's a beacon of light in an industry that pulls its punches, that focuses on areas in games that matter the least to players, and seeks to ask us for more and more money while simultaneously diminishing the quality of their own products. It's a game that you can choose to play however you want, build whatever you want, revisit mechanics, and choose whatever content that you want to play. You can sink hundreds or thousands of hours into it and likely never even pay a dime. It's a game that truly understands what it means to be a live service game, a great live service game, and it stands as an example to all. While I'm just over 30 hours in and just finally completed the campaign for the first time, I plan to continue to play, learn more of what I can of the end game, and share that experience in the future. I've enjoyed my time in Rayclast, and this Exile isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It's crazy to think how much time that I've spent trying to play this game, realizing that I still haven't even scratched the surface. There's so much on the back end of this game that I haven't even touched yet. I've barely just gotten into the Atlas of Worlds. There's a whole other passive tree for me to mess with that's a whole other thing I don't even know if I'm even ready for. I have to do a lot of research, talk to some people. The DM, if you ever watched this video, or Asmongold, somebody give me some resources or something like that. I don't know. There's just so much information. I think that's the hardest thing about getting into playing this kind of game, is that there's just so much information, because there's so many things that they've added to the game. There's so many things that they've changed in the game over time. And there's just a lot of research that needs to be done. A lot of third-party tools that I'm not really a fan of. I don't like using third-party tools to do things in games. Personally, it's just a me thing. I'd rather do everything in the game and not have to worry about going outside of the game for anything. But yeah, it's a lot, man. It's huge. It's just crazy how much game there is. And it's wild to think that they're planning on continuing to support this game when they come out with Path of Exile 2. I don't even know what that's even going to look like. I've watched a lot of the trailers for Path of Exile 2. I'll be real. I'm going to get in there day one. I'm going to stay in there day one, and I'm not going to get out. Because the last thing that I want to do is not play that game and it get too far away from me, and then me have that much more to try to have to learn. I'd rather be there day one, figure it out, know it, and then go from there. Simple as that. I think that's one of the things that it's one of the more intimidating things when it comes to Path of Exile, just a base game, is that, when you have 10 years of development, that's a lot of content to dig through. There's a lot there, and it gets away from you. And it became this thing for me where every single time I'd look at the game, I'd be like, oh man, there goes another month. There goes another year that I haven't played it. Another year or 2 or 3 of content that I have no idea what's going on with this game. And yeah, I'd like to avoid that in the future. Plus, on top of that, PoE 2 looks sick. Oh God, it looks so sick. It's so interesting and cool that I didn't really talk about this in the video, and I probably should have brought it up somewhere else. But one of the things that I was thinking about was the fact that they don't just make an ARPG. They are trailblazers. They're trying and testing and doing all kinds of different things and seeing what else will work in this kind of game. And the rest of the games that are in the genre, not throwing flack at them or anything like that. They're not doing a whole lot to try to innovate it. And to be honest, I think it's a genre that does need some innovation, because otherwise it's just going to get too dated for younger audiences that, after we're all old and crusty and can't play games anymore. But I think it's really cool, especially looking to see how they're putting in combos and stuff like that. I can already see that they're implementing some stuff for new player experience, UI improvements, and things like that. I hope some of that stuff makes its way back to Path of Exile, though. That's something that I saw recently with, was it No Man's Sky? No Man's Sky is working on Light No Fire. They did some really cool stuff in their development of Light No Fire, and they thought, why don't we just go ahead and put it in our other game? I think that, I want to see more live service games continue to do stuff like that. I think it's really smart. Why not? You already made it, right? So why not just port it over somewhere else if it's going to improve the experience and bring more players in? And I think there's going to be some players, even when PoE 2 comes out, I think there's going to be some people that are going to want to play PoE 1. They're going to get the background. I don't know where it's set time-wise or anything like that, but yeah. Continue to make your games good. That's it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I've really been enjoying doing video series like these. I'm going to continue to do them in the future. I have a lot of games I still need to play. A lot. Now that I'm getting into some of these free-to-play games, I'm looking at some of the other ones that I have on the list. Guild Wars 2, Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves. There's a few other ones that are on there. I don't know. If you guys are interested in any of those, let me know down in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this video, let me know. Subscribe to the channel. I talk about video games a lot. Catch me on Twitch. I play video games live and talk about news and things like that. Yeah, that's all I got. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends, and I will see you in Ray class. Peace.
Family, 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 family.